Hey guys, it's Trafotin. You know what sucks? Installing updates. No, I'm not talking about the ones on Windows. I'm talking about the ones on the Penguin OS. I was installing Ubuntu for somebody the other day, and I encountered some few but admittedly minor problems. All of this got me thinking, what are the biggest problems right now with how we install and update programs on Linux? I'm not going to focus on formats or with Ubuntu in particular because I think the problem transcends formats, distributions, and the ways we do things right now. All of this is a call for us to have better tooling and programs to make the process of updating easier for everybody, not just the people who are unfamiliar with Linux, but the developers who have to deal with it right out in the field. Let me tell you the tale of how to update Ubuntu. Ubuntu has a few methods out of the box of updating distribution. Now, when usually I set up people's computers for them, the first thing that I direct people to is Ubuntu's Update Manager, which is capable of updating your Ubuntu packages and between different versions of Ubuntu too. So that way, once the LTS version has gone past its length, you can move on over to the next LTS of Ubuntu. It's pretty nice. The big benefit of Ubuntu's Update Manager is it provides a GUI way to manage Ubuntu's auto-updating, and it also is a really visible notifications prompting users to update when a new update is available, especially if there's really critical security updates. The problem here isn't so much what Update Manager does, because I think Update Manager does a great job, but rather what Update Manager doesn't do. Because in Linux, there's a few package formats that Update Manager doesn't support. So for our purposes, I'm going to briefly touch on distribution packages and universal packages in Linux. Distribution packages are your traditional Linux packages. They're typically updated on Package Manager exclusive to that specific distribution. Common examples are, in the case of Ubuntu, Ubuntu's apt package manager, which they inherit from Debian. But if you're using something like Fedora, it's DNF. If you're using Arch Linux, it's Pacman. If you're using OpenSUSE, it's Zypper. Those are all distribution-specific package managers. There are also snaps, flatpaks, and AppImages, and each of them are a different universal package format, but they mostly work the same across most distributions. There is a major difference between universal packages on Ubuntu, and it's that universal packages like Flatpaks are not treated the same as snap packages or apt packages. If you update Ubuntu through Update Manager, only your snap and apt packages will be updated, but your Flatpaks won't. Now, Ubuntu could easily integrate this. All they have to do is just add one line, probably to their code, so that you can get your updates for your Flatpaks. But they haven't, because Flatpaks are not part of the default Ubuntu experience. If you want to update through the GUI software manager, through Update Manager, you need to download Discover or GNOME software in the apt repos, not to be confused with the Snap Store, which is also a fork of GNOME software. And you need to make sure that they have appropriate packages to update your snaps and flatpaks, because they have plugins which update your snaps and flatpaks. And this brings up the big question, which is always a massive rabbit hole and probably going to get some people bent out of shape. And it's, what is the actual intended way to install packages? And I think the thing that's going to disappoint a lot of Linux users is this. The way you have been installing packages on your computer is probably wrong. I'll tell you right now, when I was going into all of this, I learned that I've been doing everything wrong for years, and that there is actually a better way to be doing all of this, both according to the developers and maybe in terms of practice, but we'll get to that in a bit. Have you ever tried the streaming software OBS because you just want to record something on your screen? Have you ever tried it from your distributions repositories? Guess what? You're doing it wrong, because OBS's developers only test it in two ways on Linux. Have you ever tried using bottles on Fedora? Guess what? You're doing it wrong, because bottles developers hate the Fedora packager because they went rogue from the project. Have you ever tried using KeePassXC on Debian and Ubuntu? On Debian, KeePassXC is split into two packages, and the maintainer actively ignores KeePassXC's wishes. And all this might come off as really harsh, But we have to also understand that developers have very uber-specific ways of using and testing their applications. So that way, if an issue comes up, they can easily go replicate or debug that application and try to isolate any problems. So it's really important when we use programs, we are using programs only through official channels, because that's what it is tested, and that's the way we will have the least problems. But other programs might not be so lucky because they have limited resources. For example, the email provider Tuda only provides an AppImage. And what makes this worse is this isn't even the other programs that you use on your computer that aren't snaps or flatpaks. If your application doesn't have a built-in way to update, and you aren't using the snap or flatpak, you're out of luck and you have to resort to the website and download and update manually. One of my favorite programs on Linux is the application firewall OpenSnitch. OpenSnitch is not available in any repository. Instead, you have to manually download the Debian or Red Hat package from their GitHub repo releases page. What's more is the application has no mechanism to check for updates, which is really ironic when this is a program designed to protect you and it doesn't actually get updated. But that's more a distribution limitation than anything else. But also, on a completely unrelated note, the creator of OpenSnitch was the guy who discovered the 9.9 security vulnerability in cups as the time of recording. And this is why, over the last couple years, I've been super jaded about where I get my packages. And I've started to become a little more conscientious about where I download my packages and the chaos of all the different package types. So I bring all of this, and this may all come off as really overwhelming, but I want to provide a little bit of hope of what we can actually do about this. And unfortunately, the only thing we can do is develop an awareness around the idea that we need to download applications specifically from official sources and from sources that make it easier for developers to debug code and for us to report issues. And this is why we need to favor packages from official sources first and foremost, especially for universal packages like Flatpaks, snaps, or even like your Docker images. The first thing you want to do is you want to visit the website of the program you want to install. And once you're on the website, you want to try to find the downloads page, just like you would if you were on Windows or Mac. You're just doing it on Linux. Once you go to the downloads page, if there's a Flatpak or Snap available and it's officially sanctioned by the developers, you want to prioritize these packages above the others. And the main reason why is that they are containerized, they're way better secured than the packages that you get in your distributions repositories, and they get first-class updates through Snap or Flatpak. It's much easier than the alternative, especially when something like AppImages don't always integrate correctly or auto updates might be a little flaky. But what if there isn't a Snap or Flatpak available? And that's where we turn to the other methods, like a Debian or Red Hat packages. But there might also be times where packages will try to talk you out of using a Flatpak or Snap. And this is what you'll get if you use something like the Brave browser, for example. And typically, they'll try to direct you towards distribution-specific repositories, so pay really close attention when you're on the website, and there's usually a line of code you can copy and paste into your terminal to install the program that you want. But this all brings up a problem. What if you aren't running the required distribution of one of the official packages, especially if on the website the package is a Red Hat package or a Debian package? For example, I use Signal's desktop application. I know it's historically had some problems, but I find it very convenient and is what I use to call friends that I know and love. Unfortunately, Signal only provides one way to use their application, and that is their apt repository, meaning for Debian users. And as a Fedora user, I can't use apt packages. And if you're an Arch user, you can't use Debian packages either. If you're a NixOS user, you can't use Debian packages either. If you're a Voido Linux user, you can't use it, or can you? And this is where something like DistroBox comes in. DistroBox allows you to install applications independent of the Linux distribution you use, and simultaneously integrating the programs you install inside as programs you install on your normal computer, but they're really just running in a container, so it's easier to update and manage. If you're installing a package in another distribution because it's an official method or it's better maintained, the best course of action is to probably use a container instead. So because Signal only supports Debian, I created an Ubuntu DistroBox container and installed Signal inside. This way, I will always have a minimal Ubuntu installation that has Signal on it, and I can use Signal the way Signal's developers intended. And I know the solution really isn't perfect right now, and I think a lot of developers know this too. There's dumb things like if you use DaVinci Resolve, it can't identify your laptop GPU correctly. Sometimes I get crashes in Newsboat when I try to refresh my feed. If you download something for your development in a container, the container has to receive its updates independently. Then you have to use something like DistroBox's update tool, or you can use something like BoxBuddy if you prefer a GUI. But I'm also going to say this right now, and it's probably an unpopular opinion, but everyone complains about Linux packages being very fragmented and broken. But I would argue this is no different than the issues that Windows and Mac install, where programs need to be insecurely downloaded from the internet. There isn't a good way of managing updating the programs you've installed, especially since updates aren't applied evenly either, even if you use Winget on Windows. And on Windows, there's 16 different types of ways to package your applications, and Microsoft continues to deprecate them and change them around or add new ones. Especially if you're Apple, you've got to pay stupid licensing fees just so your application doesn't get flagged as malware. It's some extra steps and a lot of extra things that developers need to worry about when they package desktop applications, and it's no wonder why developers continue to package their applications as web apps or containers. Linux is the container distribution, and Linux can at least provide a way of making all of this possible, where it isn't as accessible to do on proprietary operating systems and puts you in control of your computer. But I think that's a central problem here. Your computer, whether it's a PC that runs Windows or Linux or a Mac, no matter what operating system you use, they will still treat you as if you know what computers are or if you are a developer, and it's very frustrating. Updating software on computers and installing programs on computers is a massive pain in the butt. But until a better solution is posited, we need to continue to evaluate packages mindfully based on how developers want us to and the way we can get the best experience possible. One of the biggest problems in open source software, and a complaint that people will commonly levy, is fragmentation. But I think a large part of this fragmentation is people making largely unnecessary versions of programs bearing the exact same name and probably deviating from a developer's wishes in some way in their local Linux distribution repository or just on some random website somewhere. So be warned when you visit a website. Remember the key steps to keep in mind when you download an application. Why don't you go leave a like on this video? Leave a like on this video if you also want to struggle and suffer through the chaos that is browser URI protocols. You can also visit my website, trafotin.com, trafotin.com, and you can also donate me money through Patreon or YouTube memberships or cryptocurrency. So, thank you for watching. I will see you all next time, and I hope you don't get stuck managing your containers.